Hi class, this is Professor Barry Brennan. I am talking this evening to my argumentation class, and we are talking about the uses of, or the use of language in argumentation. And we're going to spend the next probably 3 or 4 videos talking about the significance of language and words and why we should pay attention to them, especially in argumentation. But you could actually use this lecture that I'm going to give with anything, because language shapes our reality, how we see reality, how we respond to reality. Language is a shaper. And here's the funny thing about language. It's all made up. We decide what something means. There is no meaning in a word but the meaning that we give it. So let's go there and take a look at that. Here we go. The use of language in argumentation. Here we go. That's kind of cool, huh? I thought that was kind of cool. I like stuff like that. So let's get moving. So here we are. Language has no intrinsic meaning. So there's nothing in the word meaning. It doesn't mean anything except the meaning that we give it. We've assigned it to mean something. The word chica in Spanish, or cholo is like a slang word, right? But all those things, they have meaning because of the meaning that we've decided. In language, we agree upon a particular thing means something. We name it, right? It has a name. So here's a glass. It's a mason jar glass. We could have named it, a Kleenex, and it would have the same function, right? It's just a word that we decide we name it. So language itself has no intrinsic meaning. It's completely decided by us humans and our culture and our nation and the region that we live in. Regionally, like how Californians talk versus people in Tennessee talk totally differently. Here we go. So language is symbolic. Something else you want to keep in mind. It's symbolic. It's completely symbolic, meaning it is a symbol for something else. This lamp is a symbol. The word lamp, the word L-A-M-P, is a symbol for this actual thing that we call lamp, right? It's symbolic. So it means something else. A symbol is something that represents something else. When we can think of symbols, when we talk about symbols, we always think of symbols like this, or there's many more than that. I just pulled that off the net. But here's like the Greek alphabet. This is just as legit as the, English alphabet, or the Spanish alphabet, or the Egyptian alphabet, right? It's an alphabet. It's how they put words together. And they have sounds that they've decided how the sounds mean and how you speak. I always think it's funny, because I know some Spanish, and the H is a h sound. It's a h sound in h, usually in English, right? But in Spanish, it's h. Completely different. It has nothing to do with an H, what I think of in English, because English is my first language. Again, it's arbitrary. We assign it, but then we agree upon it. We agree on it as a culture and society to follow those rules of that language that we made up. We agree to follow the rules that language has. So what does this have to do with argumentation? Well, when we put words together, if you don't know what this is, you'll figure it out by reading it right now as I'm talking. When we put words together, depending on when we put the words in, like in this case, this is back in 1700s. When we put the words together, could have been 1600s. We write them in actually during a time period, and there's context involved, meaning in the 1700s, how people thought, how people behaved, what they believed in. There might be some similarity to 2021, but there's a lot of things that are different, right? Certainly they didn't have the internet. They didn't even conceive of the internet, probably. My God, I don't even know when, light bulbs were invented or any of that. I don't even know if they had that. I think they still had candles then. So the point is, context is everything. The problem is we have documents like this. This is the First Amendment, freedom of speech. We have documents that we try to interpret we can only interpret them from our point of view right now. We are bound by our point of view. We can try to go there, but we didn't live in 1776 or 1750. We didn't live then. So we haven't grown up at that time in the United States. It wasn't even the United States then, right? We haven't gone through any of that. We don't know what it's like. That hasn't shaped us. We are shaped by living at this time right now. And so how we interpret things determines the time that we live in, often determines, and our culture and our gender and our life experience determines how we interpret these things. Again, we'll go back to there's an agreed upon interpretation. But part of the problem when I say open to interpretation is that's what happens, is people read this, people have various interpretations. And the argument's always, well, what did the founding fathers have in mind? I don't know. Are we in the mind of the founding fathers? And then people go gather information saying, well, Jefferson wrote this, and Washington wrote this, and Adams wrote this, and whatever. Who else? Benjamin Franklin. All the people that were involved with the writing of the Bill of Rights. So again, we're still limited by our ability to interpret that time. So these two, that's the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, and you think about how much trouble, right? Especially the Second Amendment. What does this mean? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So that's been open to interpretation forever, right? And even in the first, freedom of the press or freedom of speech. What does that mean? It doesn't say anything about there you can't yell fire in a theater. Does it? It doesn't say that in there, does it? Later on, we came to come up with those ideas that you can't do that, right? But it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. In some ways, to me, that's pretty straightforward. But it also means that anybody has the right to say anything. Is that okay? I don't know. Maybe it is. It's open for debate. And so it gets debated. So here we are. Many ways to define a word. Let's take a look at those for a minute. So we know things by what they're not, right? We know a cat. We know what a certain type of dog is by what it's not, right? We define things by what they're not. We understand things because of the opposite or by something that contrasts with it, right? And the way we define our world by what it's not. We define words by people who state by the authority of people who state. That's what that means. People have authority and state what that means. We define a word by example, right? Well, and what we mean by authority too is like we'll say, well, according to Webster's dictionary, or according to former President Donald Trump, or according to former President Obama, whatever, right? That's an authority. Defining how we define words or our understanding of words. Defining by example, we give examples to explain, what that word means. Defining by function. What is the function of that word? What's the purpose of that word? What does it do? Etymology. Etymology means defining by the root word. Oftentimes we can have a better understanding of a word if the root word is in Latin, or if the root word is in German, or even with the root of the word, because most words have root of something that it's related to. And sometimes when you think a word makes sense, or how we've come to understand that word, and then you look at the root of the word, they don't always correlate or make sense. Sometimes they correlate directly, and sometimes they don't correlate at all. Comparison and contrast. We understand words by comparing them and contrasting to other things or other words. I mean, how many of you took the GREs for the graduate exam, but took other exams and you remembered like the word and, anything with anti means against, right? You remember how you figure out like the meaning of a word by breaking it down that way. And then there's the operational definition of the word. Like how does it work in the context of a situation? So there's many ways that we can define the word. How does it operate? How does it work in the context, the meaning in the context of that? So what are we doing here? You know, why are we even talking about defining it, and why do we need to define it, and what does it all mean? Well, think about it for a minute. You're about to involve yourselves into some debate. And if there are that many ways to go around defining or understanding a word, I gave you all the different ways. You know, except for like the literal like dictionary definition of it. But there's all ways to understand it. What you want to do as a debater, as an arguer, as a student in the argumentation class, is be able to take away any ambiguity, which is any vagueness, understand its relevance, right? The relevance of the language that you're using. And then what you do when you know what you're talking about specifically, when you're that specific and you use concrete words and you have a good understanding of what exactly you're saying, you're not just throwing words around, but you're using words. You're controlling your words. You're using those words specifically you've chosen those words to define something or to explain something. Then you control the direction of the conversation. In debate, that's what this is about. Part of it is about control. How well do you control the conversation, but how well defining it and setting the direction, especially if you're on the affirmative, you're going to set the direction of the debate by your proposition. So how well you define it and explain it is going to be important because that sets up like the structure, the foundation for the conversation. So being able to know to take away are there other meanings to address that? If there's more meanings to the word, what is its relevance? What is the key term in your argument? If you don't define it, your opponent has a chance to do that for you, and then your opponent controls the direction of the conversation. Then you have to go back and address what they say. Just think about that. Defining your terms defines your playing ground and defines the direction for your argument. And you always need to ask yourself, what words need defining? What words in my argument need defining? What words can be taken out of context and understood a different way? It seems picky, but there's power in it. You know, begin to learn to say exactly what you mean. That's a powerful person. Taking the time to use your words. The language is part of your voice. Taking the time to say exactly what you mean so there's no misunderstanding. And that's what argumentation is going to help you do. I'm going to stop here and we're going to go to the next slide, and I'll see you in a bit.